Hello my lovelies, and welcome to the Spirit Tarot and Healing Arts YouTube channel. If you are new, welcome back. If you are a returning viewer, I'm Rin, and today I am going to be doing a how-to video to show you how to do a Do They Love Me reading using the Lenormand or the Kipper. I will be showing you how to make this a queer-friendly reading because I know a lot of people kind of shy away from Lenormand or even Kipper because they find it difficult to queer these systems, but it can be done, and I'm going to show you just a couple of ways in this video. I may do a video in the future. I would like to do a video in the future where I show you how to queer a few of the older cartomancy systems to make them more contemporary and to fit into today's notions. But that's something that I would like to do in the future. But I will be showing you today, when I show you these spreads, just how you can do that with the Lenormand and the Kipper for this particular reading. Now, when I say Do They Love Me, this can be a reading that you do for yourself, or it can be a reading that you are doing for someone else. So it's just asking, does the person of interest love the querent? Now, you'll see here I have the Bluebird Lenormand because we're going to start off with Lenormand because more people are familiar with Lenormand than Kipper, and Lenormand is a little bit easier to queer than the Kipper system is. You'll notice that I have the significator cards for the Lenormand laid out here. Now, most modern Lenormand decks come with two sets of the person cards. Now, it is true, when you are buying mass market Lenormand decks, I do not know of a mass market Lenormand deck that is designed for queer readings. You can, however, find indie Lenormand decks that are specifically designed for queer readings. But because most mass market Lenormand decks today come with two sets of significator cards, it is pretty easy to queer them in most cases, but not all. So usually you'll have a case like this where what they've done is they've done a younger couple and an older couple. So if you are reading for a same-sex couple, then instead of having a lady and a man, you'll just pull out the man and the man, or the woman and the woman, and use those as your significator cards. And that's what you'll be doing for this particular reading. Now, it doesn't matter, you know, you can use the man card for a trans man, the woman card for a trans woman, where we can kind of still have an issue where this extra set of significators doesn't cover situations is if you have somebody who is non-binary and does not want to use either of the traditional significator cards, then we've got to get a little more creative, but it can be done. Now, I just want to say that I have done a lot of readings for people of all different gender identities and sexual orientations, and I've never had an issue making it work. A lot of times, even if a person is non-binary, if I say, you know, do you want me to, you know, figure out a significator that represents that, a lot of times they will just pick one of these and be like, just go with that. We'll just say it's me. It doesn't matter. Because like in tarot, you know, the king does not have to be someone who is male at birth. You know what I mean? It is a type of energy that doesn't really have to do with gender, even though it's called a king. And a lot of people will do that in the Lenormand as well, where, yes, there's a man or a woman on the card, but we're really ignoring that and just saying, this is Joe Smith, whoever our querent is. And just, you know, this is Joe Smith, and this is Joe Smith's person of interest, and it doesn't matter what is on the card. But it is really nice and really important to have representation. So it's nice that we have this option when it comes to Lenormand cards with most decks that there are extra significator cards, because then it makes it really easy if you are reading for same-sex couples. Now, if using these doesn't work for you, that is perfectly fine, and I have 2 suggestions if that is the case for you. The first one is, Lenormand cards tend to be about the size of playing cards, and please do not mind my chipped nail polish. I have had a migraine for 3 consecutive days this week, and doing my nails was not on my list of priorities, so please forgive that. But as you can see, playing cards are very close in size to Lenormand cards. There's just this little bit. So you could take this particular bicycle deck that I have just has, well, I grabbed the wrong card. Where is it? There it is. So there's a card that comes with this particular deck that just has the backing of the card on both sides. So if you have cards like that, you could pick out 2 of these and just make sure that you write 28 on one and 29 on the other, and then you know that's person 1 and person 2. You can also use the jokers out of a deck. You do want to take 2 of them and trim them to match the size of your Lenormand cards, and you do want to make sure that you mark on them 28 and 29 so that you have person 1 and person 2, or main character 1, main character 2. We call the main character in Kipper. You could use that in this too if you're making your own cards. The other thing you can do as well, if you don't have a Lenormand deck at all, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that Kipper did not initially have its own deck. It was actually done with playing cards. So you can online find which playing card corresponds to which Lenormand card, and then you could, let me just grab a card here. You could, for example, the gentleman, so card number 28, so we'll just call them person 1. You'd find the Ace of Hearts. I'm not going to take the time to find that right now, but you'd find the Ace of Hearts and you just write person 1 on there, and then you would find the Ace of Spades and write person 2 on there, and then you have a completely gender neutral deck, and you would just go through the rest of the deck. As you can see, this particular deck has the playing card inserts on them. So 21 is the 8 of clubs, the mountain, so you would find the 8 of clubs in your playing card deck and write the mountain. And then by doing that, you could make your own Lenormand deck that is completely gender neutral. And again, like I said, there are indie decks that you can find on Etsy that are completely gender neutral Lenormand decks. But those are some options if you're working with a deck like this, a mass market deck. Those are some options. If you need to, you could take these out and put like the jokers or the card that I showed that has the backing of that playing card deck on the front and back. You could just take these out, insert those into your Lenormand deck, just cut them so that they match in size. Or you could transform a deck of regular playing cards into your own gender neutral Lenormand deck. Alright, enough about significators. I think that we've covered it solidly enough, at least for this particular spread. So let's move on to actually doing this spread. And so you're going to need to pick out your 2 significator cards from your deck first. Whatever you're using, whether you have, let's put these in order, whether you have the gentleman and the lady, the man and the lady, whether you have person 1, person 2. There's a really cute Lenormand deck that I want. I think it's the Lilac Lenormand. I can't remember if that's the name of it for sure or not. But it has player 1 and player 2, and it has the Joy-Cons from the Switch as the image on the cards, and I really want to get that deck because I think it's just so stinking cute, and I love that it's player 1 and player 2. Just, it makes my little heart happy. But anyhow, you'll get out your 2 significator cards. Whichever one represents your person, and then the one to represent their, well, whichever one represents the querent, and then whichever one represents their person of interest. And you're just going to lay those down for the moment together. We can just set them aside. But you need to pull a card for your querent and a card for their person of interest out of the deck. Now, I'm going to do a sample reading here. So we're going to look at a friend of mine, and does his woman of interest love him? So that's what we're going to look at. Our querent is a man, and their person of interest is a woman. So we're going to use cards 28 and 29. Once you've set aside your people cards, you're going to shuffle the rest of the Lenormand deck, asking if the person of interest loves my friend. Alright, so once you feel that you have shuffled enough, you're going to draw the top 7 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it does not matter how you lay them down, because we are going to shuffle again. So it doesn't matter like how you lay them out. Just pull the top 7 cards off. Put the 2 people cards into the 7 cards. You can just put them on top. You can slide them in like I did. Whatever works for you. And then you're going to shuffle those 9 cards, because we're going to be making a 9 card box spread for this. Okay, I feel like this is good. Now, when it comes to laying out the cards in the order, this is how I lay them out. I lay them out horizontally from top to bottom. Some readers, I'll show you in just a second. Okay, so I lay them out like this. Some readers will lay them like this, and I've seen other readers that will start here and then they'll go like this, and then they'll do the corners, and I've seen other readers do that but counterclockwise instead of clockwise. Whatever is natural for you, that's how you can lay them down. Just be consistent. You know, spirit, your intuition, your higher self, whatever you're connecting with when you read cards, as long as you are consistent and you just, that's how you do it, then, you know, that's, the cards are going to get laid out in the right order for you, is what I'm trying to say. All right, so for me with Lenormand, when I'm doing this, do they love the person? This deck is not the best, because ideally you want a deck where the people cards are either facing each other or facing directly away from each other. And in this particular deck, they're both facing the same way. Now, for me, if I have a deck where they face the opposite direction so that they can face towards each other or away from each other, then I will look at that. In this particular deck, they can't. So I look for the person, the querent, which here, he is in this 3rd row, which is the future. His person of interest is in the present. So the fact of the matter is, the person of interest is behind him, and I usually take that as a less than auspicious positioning. If the person of interest is behind the querent, then that to me means that there can be indications of trouble in the connection, or that maybe there isn't a love connection there. But we look at the rest of the cards for context. Now, you can go ahead and read this as you would any 9-card Lenormand spread. So here I look to the center for sort of the root of things, or the central message. That's what I do personally with a 9-card Lenormand. I know not everyone does that, but I look here, and we have the scythe, which means something coming to an end. It could mean harvest, but I've already kind of glanced at some of these cards, and we're going to go with that. Here, I read this as sort of a message. The message for the querent is that there is a secret. There is something that the querent, my friend, is not privy to when it comes to the lady and her feelings for him. So there's some sort of secret. Something is going to come to an end. Now, again, Most people read the scythe negatively. I generally read it negatively as well. Once in a while, I will read it as harvest, depending on what's going on in the rest of the spread or the cards around it. But in this case, something is being cut off, something is ending. So in the present, we have the past. I'm not going to go over the past, but you can read the past line if you want. This is the present line, this is the future line. And we can get more in depth with the 9-card spread, but we're basically just kind of looking for a yes or no here. And we've got her behind him, which means, you know, there could be trouble in paradise. There, you know, not all is as it seems. We've got that secret card. We've got the scythe, cutting something off, ending something, which to me, the fox can be cunning and deceit. The tower, something official. There's been a deception. There's been a secret about something official. So this person of interest, they may have a commitment somewhere else that my friend is not aware of, or they maybe have made a commitment somewhere else that he is not aware of. And I feel in this particular case, the past is not in the past. It is commingled with the present. And we're cutting off the joy and happiness here of the sun. Like, what he feels for her, I feel like it's not necessarily reciprocated, and the potential joy that he was looking for with this person is going to be cut off. The good news for him, though, we have the present here. We've got the child in the letter with him. That means he's going to be getting news of a new beginning in love. So this person looks to be passing out of his life, but in this future line, we can see hope for something new on the horizon for him when it comes to love. It just doesn't happen to include this person of interest. So there's a little sample reading. Again, you can also read the diagonals in a 9-card spread. There's some different things you can do. You can make this as in-depth or just as cursory as you want to do. That's one of the beauties of this spread. But the key points that you're looking for here, you're looking for where the two people cards come out in relation to each other. If they're in the same line, that's a good sign. If the person of interest is in front of the querent in the spread, that is a good sign. If you do have the cards where you can make them face each other, then that is a good sign. So let me show you what I mean by that. These are actually the Kipper cards. But you see how if the cards land like this, the people are facing each other. And if the cards land like this, they're away from each other. So let me lay these over these because then you'll see. So if we were using this stack, it would change the meaning of this spread. Because even though usually if the person is behind the querent, I will usually take that as a negative sign, unless they are facing each other, because facing each other shows them in accordance. Now, in this particular case, if we would switch these, where my friend came out up here and his person of interest came out here, they have their backs to each other, so that would show her moving on from him. So directionality can play a part. Directionality, some people read Lenormand with direction in mind or direction for certain cards in mind. Some don't. One of the ones that we do generally like to read with directionality are the people cards, but not all Lenormand decks make that possible. If you are using a deck of playing cards, if you went that route, then you can just use what I did here, where if the person of interest is behind the querent, it's not a good sign. If the person of interest is in front of the querent, then it is a good sign. Because if you're using a deck of playing cards, you don't have people facing one way or the other. So you can make this as simple as laying out the cards and seeing where the two people are in relation to each other. You can dive a little deeper into past, present, and future. You can add in, you know, I read this as a message card. I read this as a central card. You can do the diagonals. You can do all different things depending on how deep into this you want to go. If you like to read Lenormand with houses included, then what you would do is have a second Lenormand deck. For this particular spread, you would need a second Lenormand deck. But you would first lay down, you would shuffle a Lenormand deck, lay down 9 cards. Those would be your houses. Then you would pull out the 2 significator cards like I did, and then shuffle, pull the top 7 cards, shuffle all that together, and then you'd lay those 9 cards out on top of the cards you laid down to indicate your houses, and that could add a whole nother layer of depth to your reading as well if you really want to make this a very meaty, very in-depth reading. So I like this because depending on your skill level or the amount of time you have, you can really decide how much information you want or need out of this spread to answer, do they love you? Now we're going to look at Kipper, and admittedly, Kipper can be harder to queer. So I only have 2 Kipper decks. There are not a lot of mass market Kipper decks out there for those of us in America. Kipper is very hard to find resources for on English, and it's very hard to find decks in English. You can find independent Kipper decks on Etsy. I have found a few, but unlike Lenormand, where I found a lot of queer-friendly or queer-centered Lenormand decks on Etsy, I have yet to find a queer-centered Kipper deck that is mass market or even independent on Etsy. Now, I do know a YouTube creator who has created his own Kipper deck. It is queer friendly. It was designed with queer needs in mind, but I have not been able to find it available for sale anywhere. If I ever do find it for sale, I will make sure to let you know so that if you want to pick that up, you can. So here's what I do. Again, Kipper cards tend to be about the same size as Lenormand cards, which tend to be about the same size as playing cards. So same thing, you could take that card like I showed that has just the back on both sides, or jokers, and you could just mark one as main character 1, main character 2. This is the Siren Song Kipper deck. It comes with the Siren Song Lenormand deck. It is a package deal. You get both decks in one thing. It's a pretty good price for the fact that you're getting a Kipper and a Lenormand deck. And this is the only mass market Kipper deck that I have seen, at least in English, that does at least make an attempt to include the queer community when it comes to significators. Now, here's the thing. Kipper can be harder to queer than Lenormand because there are a lot of people cards in the Lenormand, and they are traditionally all gendered. So when it comes to significator cards, because we do this the same way that we do the Lenormand one, I like this deck because Siren 1 really doesn't have a gender. To me, Siren 1 is either non-binary, gender fluid, I don't know. And like, if we want to try to like figure out what's in Siren 1's pants, well, good luck with that because there's tentacles. So you know what I mean? Like, you could assign a gender to this card, but to me, this is an ambiguous card. The issue, or where it becomes hard, is when you're doing a reading like this, where you have a person of interest, if your querent would identify as this card, does their person of interest identify as female or feminine? The ways around that potential issue, because this is not really, if you have a lesbian couple, this, in my opinion, could work, but if you have a gay couple, they might not be feeling this combination for the querent and the person of interest. It just depends on people and their preferences. I would recommend that if you do a lot of readings for the queer community, or if you are queer, I would recommend buying 2 copies of this. And I know we can be like, well, I shouldn't have to buy 2 copies just so that I can do the type of reading. I get you. I feel you. What I will say is this: as a professional reader, there are times where just because I love a deck, I buy 2 copies of it. Or because I do a certain kind of reading with a deck, I have 2 copies of it because I need 2 copies of the deck. So there are other instances where we buy 2 copies of a deck on the regular anyhow. So if you are wanting to do readings that are gender fluid or non-binary, I would recommend buying 2 copies of this deck and then just using Siren 1 twice for your readings. That also gives you the option then, if you have a gay couple, you could use Siren 1 twice to represent 2 mask presenting persons. It just gives you options to work with. And that's why I wanted to show this particular deck in this video, because I do feel like you can, especially with this Siren 1, you can queer this Kipper a little bit easier than some other Kipper decks. The other thing I want to mention too, just like I mentioned before, false person is almost always depicted as a woman in the Kipper. And, I mean, I could take a little offense to that, you know, being a assigned female at birth and a femme presenting person. I could take offense to the fact that it is the female gender that is used to represent the false person in most of the Kipper decks that I have seen. But it's really not about the gender, it's about the energy that goes with that. So I only really worry about gender matching people in significator cards. For the rest of them, I read them as energy, not gender. Like, it could be a Fig Newton on the false person card and it wouldn't matter, because it's not about what is on the card, it's about what that card represents. And the thing with Lenormand and Kipper both, they're not as they don't rely on symbols as much as tarot does. Tarot is very metaphorical and esoteric, whereas Lenormand and Kipper are a little more literal, which I think is why people have a problem with the gendered cards in these two systems, because they do tend to overall be more literal, but I take them as literal in forms of energy and action rather than in literal gender, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Okay, enough about that. Let me show you how to do the Kipper. And the reason why I like to have Kipper as an option for this particular spread as well is because there are so many people cards in Kipper. And so, you know, if there's a third party or if there's friends or family that is having an effect on this potential connection, then Kipper can allow that to come through a little bit better than Lenormand. So again, you'll separate out your significator cards, main character 1, main character 2. It doesn't matter if you have bought 2 of this deck and you're using 2 of one or the other. Because, oh, that's the other thing I want to say. Kipper cards, for some reason, don't usually come with extra sets of significator cards, which I find odd, since Lenormand does that pretty standardly. I would think that Kipper would follow suit too. And the fact that this author and creator of this deck does try to be more queer friendly, I was really surprised that there's just the 1 copy of each significator card. But again, pick out your cards, whether you're using the ones in the deck, whether you've got 2 decks and you're mixing and matching, whether you have transformed some playing cards into your significator cards so that you have gender neutral cards, whatever works for you. Your querent is always, unless you are going by gender, right? So again, let's look at my friend. The querent, generally speaking, should always be main character 1. However, if I was reading for myself, then I would be main character 2, because I do identify with this particular card. So it's up to your querent and how your querent identifies. As a general rule, you're going to want, for this deck, other decks, it's very obvious which is which, but for this particular deck, I like to make the querent main character 1, if that applies, and then main character 2 as the person of interest, unless the coupling dictates otherwise. But you do it however it works for you. So anyhow, again, you pick those out, you pull 7 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that you have 9 cards total. give them a shuffle and lay them out just as before. It's interesting how this card came out. All right, so all right, now here's an interesting thing. They are facing each other. So they both, at least previously, have wanted a connection with each other. They wanted this connection to work. His person of interest did think fondly of him, did have feelings for him, but if we look at this, the woe card is between them. So we look at, this is the beginning of the story in Kipper, so we've got change here. So a change happened, and that is how we have gotten to where we are in this relationship right now, because we're reading on right now. So a change has happened, and that makes sense because we've got his person of interest in the past with woe between them. And so something has come between them. Normally, when they're facing, we'll take that as a good sign, but excuse me, we've got to take the cards around them in context. And with woe right between them and change as the beginning of this story that we're reading here in these Kipper cards, something has changed. They wanted to be on the same page. They wanted to be in love, to have a connection, but something has changed. Now, I read the opening of the story, and then the ending of the story is him, my friend. So for me, the ending of the story here is probably him standing on his own. We do have the courthouse and the gift in the future with him. These are the things on his mind. He wants the gift of an official long-term relationship. This is what he wants. However, there is the woe between them. We have the good outcome card here in the center. So presently, I'm going to keep my thoughts to myself on this rich girl card, because it does kind of indicate the kind of person that his person of interest may be. And they want a certain type of connection, and they don't feel that my friend can give them that connection. They don't feel that my friend can get on the level that the person of interest wants them on. So he's wanting something very specific, very long-term and committed. She, on the other hand, has reservations. How this will play out, I don't know. But what we do know, because we are asking, does she love him? She had feelings for him. She saw this potentially going somewhere, but in the recent past, her ideas, thoughts, and feelings have changed, or in the process of changing. There is this woe between them, and basically she's uncertain. She's not particularly happy with him and where she thinks things can go with him. She doesn't necessarily, the long road to change for her, those are her thoughts. They are not on the same page, because her thoughts are up here, his thoughts are up here. So in this, anything above the person is their thoughts. Below can either be read as foundation or fears. It just depends on your reading style. Different readers do that differently. But they want to have a connection. She has, at least in the past, wanted a romantic connection with him, but there are things stalling this or presenting an obstacle between the two of them, and she is not sure where she wants this to go, or if she wants this to go any farther. Again, positioning is important. So, you know, we do have them facing each other in this. If he was over here and she was over here, I'd be like, nope, this is done for. This is over with. Backs to each other, woe between them. This would be an absolute no. Now, if you had positive cards between them, then them like this would be a very good, a very auspicious placement. Even though she is in the past, they're facing each other. If there was a positive card here and positive thoughts, then I would interpret this differently. But given what we have, there's issues here that may or may not be resolved. That is one of the things we always need to keep in mind when we're doing love readings or any other type of reading. This is just a snapshot of what's going on, and the cards are not the boss of us. We are the boss of us in our lives. So it's up to us. You know, if we don't like what we see in the cards, it's up to us to work to change it. And readings are always meant to be a tool to help you make empowered decisions for yourself. So, you know, for my friend, he could decide, you know what, we're not on the same page. It's best for both of them to go their separate ways. Or he may look at these readings and go, oh, you know what? Okay, I know what the issue is. Let me work to get on the same page with her, and we can then go forward with this relationship. There's different options here, depending on how he feels about things and the information that he gets out of this reading. He can decide, is this something to work on mending because there's an obstacle, there's an issue. So is this a relationship that has potential? Is it healthy overall? And this is something to work through? Or is this the nudge to, you know, be like, you know what, both of us would be happier if we went our separate ways? And that's not for me as the reader to say. That is entirely up to him and his person of interest as to where they go from here. I just relay the information in the cards, and the querent can take that under advisement as they are making their own decisions for themselves. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's video. I hope that you've liked this reading. If you have any questions, leave them down below because I'm happy to answer them. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel because it helps out so much. And until I see you again, blessings to you wherever your journey finds you.